There are many reasons why we've led on food waste. Obviously, food is core to our business. And when you step back from food, let's say at a global level, you've got some really very big issues. A third of all the food that is produced in the world is lost or wasted. And that's at a time when 1 in 9 people, that's 800 million people, are undernourished. So there's a problem there in and of itself. If you then look at that economically, Champions 12.3 would say that $940 billion of economic loss is related to that food that is wasted. And if none of those things are compelling as to why we should be interested, if you took the greenhouse gases that are associated with food waste and made it a country, it would be the third biggest greenhouse gas emitter after the US and China. So pick any one of those 4 reasons. That's why I think we should be interested in, as a food retailer, it's absolutely core to what it is we do. You've always got this very deliberate challenge of how you match supply and demand. And so just the very nature of getting 365 days a year, all of the supply to equal demand across everything, let's be honest, is nigh on impossible. So you've always got an element of food waste within a retail operation. And then the question is going to be, actually, what can you do to reduce that, either economically? It's a big cost for businesses like ours. But then you get into some of the other questions that I alluded to earlier, which is actually food that's still safe to be eaten. Do we really want that to be wasted, even if by waste we mean animal feed or energy recovery? So we took a big, long look at the whole of the food chain, both with our suppliers, but in our own operation and in customers' homes, and then say, actually, what can we do to reduce food loss and waste in total? What we basically did was say, look, let's start with our own business. So in a retailer like Tesco, our food waste number as a percentage is really low compared to most of the industry. But because of the size of our business, the quantum of food is still significant. And so we said, right, the first thing we've got to do is lower that waste in our own operation, and then think about that waste which we see as inevitable. How do we actually donate that so that it doesn't go to any element of waste? That was first point. And then what we do is talk with our suppliers about how it is we can end-to-end plan better, what demand signal we give, and how it is they supply. So we reduce waste all the way through. So that's happened to crop utilization, crop flushes, the way that we work, but also using the same donation routes that we have with people like FareShare, so that if there is any excess, that can be redirected and donated to the community projects that we support. So Tesco has been zero waste to landfill since 2009. 2013, first retailer to publish its waste data. Very difficult, let's be honest, very controversial, attracted lots of attention, but a real commitment. In 2014, I was fortunate. I worked nearly 30 years with Unilever around the world, most of my time working in countries where food availability was a problem. You then come into retail and you see that despite all the best efforts, there's an element of waste at the end of the day, and you say, actually, is there something we can do? We put together Food Cloud, it was a tech startup in Dublin, an app that allows us to capture all our potential waste, together with FareShare, who are food redistribution, and they built with us a network of charities and community projects around the UK that allow us to donate any surplus food that we have to those community projects. So every day, every store within Tesco logs the excess food that it might have at the end of the day that can't legally be then put back on sale, even if it's still safe to be eaten, and that is then transmitted to the local charities to the store, who then come and pick up that food. And that's the triangle of relationships between Tesco, Food Cloud and FareShare that has allowed us to redistribute nearly 80% of the food that otherwise would have been wasted in our store. Only 2 weeks ago, spent a day with FareShare in the community in southwest London. And, pick an example. There's a very inspirational gentleman called Mansuk who runs a temple in Ealing, who runs a food kitchen. And the food that a number of Tesco stores provide to his community centre is used there, but also redistributed to homeless around London. And basically the food that we donate through this is about £8,000 a year, and it allows him to feed at least 300 homeless people a week in that area. So you see it's a way that these community projects can take the funding that they have and use it more broadly, because actually we allow the food that we supply, they then don't have to buy, right? And so be it food kitchens, be it food redistribution, he's having a massive impact in that community in Ealing and indeed in central London. I'm a very big believer. As a business, being responsible is something that we would hold very dear. It's particularly important to me, having lived my life where I've seen food to be a shortage, to then see any waste just feels completely wrong to me. But actually, even more importantly, if you go to our colleagues, we're standing here in Tooley Street, but if you go to our colleagues, the fact that they are seeing food that otherwise would have gone to animal feed or energy recovery being redirected to local community projects that they would know, and they can see the impact that they're having, is fantastic. So 24 of our largest Tesco suppliers also agreed to publish their food waste data, and actually then also to redirect any surplus they had to the same fair share distribution infrastructure that we use. So suppliers came on board, they shared their data. So this year, as part of the Champions 12.3 declaration, 24 Tesco suppliers published their food waste data. We then went to our own label suppliers and worked on that end-to-end supply chain that we talked about, in order that we reduce waste at source or redirect if there is any. And then we went to the IGD and we shared all of that with every retailer in the UK, because we're more than happy to share the IP, the app that allows this to happen, or indeed the infrastructure with FareShare to promote that redistribution. So at every level, we've tried to share what it is we're doing with the industry. And I'm pleased to say that actually a number of our competitors have taken it up, and that's increased the amount of donation that's happening. So there's an awful lot going on. We talk about affordable, healthy, sustainable food for all. And if you think about it, every day what we're trying to do is make food more affordable by the work we do with our suppliers. That's the core of what we do. But if you talk about health, right, we recently signed, we have a 5-year charity partnership with Cancer Research UK, Diabetes UK and British Heart Foundation. And the whole idea there is, how can we help through food and diet some of the diseases that are actually prevalent in the society today, and that's a 5-year behaviour change project. In addition, from an environmental point of view, we have an agreement with a relationship with the WWF, which is trying to look at how we can halve the environmental impact of the basket that people shop. So at the moment we're assessing and measuring the environmental impact of the baskets that we serve, and the target is, how can we reduce that by 50% by working with WWF together. And finally, a little over a year ago, we proposed to the government how we would be very happy to be involved in an initiative to create a completely closed loop system for packaging in the UK, to address all of the issues around plastics that are clearly there. So be it health, be it affordability, be it environmental, actually Tesco's quite active in all of those spaces. If we talk about food waste, as part of our commitment to food waste, I chair something called Champions 12.3. It's about the UN Sustainable Development Goal of halving food loss and waste. Actually, over the last 18 months, there's an enormous amount being done. Really pleased with the progress. But the interesting thing, if we're really critical, is companies have done a lot. I mentioned earlier some of the things that's happened in the UK, and I'm pleased to say that's happening around the world. Governments have been less active. And actually, we've been working harder to try and convince governments that they need to do more. In fairness, here in the UK, as part of some of that stimulus, you've now seen DEFRA come back with a waste strategy, which is actually starting to represent what we had in 12.3. So actually some really good progress in the UK, but more to be done. On things such as packaging and on health, government needs to be involved. I talked about a closed loop system. We're happy to do that, but we need the government to re-establish a national infrastructure for the recovery and the recycling of plastics if we're going to close the loop. A disaggregated infrastructure is helping no one, so they need to step forward there. For sure, there's a lot of pressure on retail at the minute, but I genuinely don't think this is a question of, this is the business and what do we do about food waste. Actually, you have to embed it right at the core. We built it into our operating model so that we could actually be part of our business is donating that food waste. So it's not an activity alongside. We put it right in as we think about all the challenges that we have. But the other thing, which is maybe relevant, is one of the reasons with Champions 12.3, we looked at the business case. So if there are people out there that are not interested from an ethical or a moral or an environmental point of view, the economic case is actually good. So that study showed for every $1 invested in avoiding food waste, there's a commercial return of $14. I'm 4.5 years into the retail business. There's more goes on in retail in the UK than people appreciate. So I don't think the retail industry has done a particularly good job in sharing and explaining actually what a good job the food industry does in terms of providing healthy, affordable food for everybody here in the UK. Having said that, though, there's much more we could do. Actually, I don't think retail has been particularly good at collaboration. We launch initiatives, but we don't share. And that's why I'm so keen in the food waste. And that's why I went to the IGD and said, look, we'll prove it as Tesco, because if we can make it work in Tesco, it'll probably work anywhere. And we'll share the IP with you. We'll give it to you. Right? Because I don't see it as a source of competitive advantage. So if I had one plea for the industry is when we innovate, let's share. Innovate and share, and then increase the impact even more. And then I think maybe people will look at the industry rather than just one company or another in a much more favourable light, because they'll see just what a responsible industry actually is when sometimes it's not given the credit it deserves.